The home I built became the cage they wanted me out of. Can you imagine? 68 years of breathing, of living, of giving everything I had to the people I loved most, and in one moment, one devastating, soul-crushing moment, it all crumbled to dust in my hands. I was humming. God help me, I was actually humming as I walked through that front door, grocery bags heavy in my arms, thinking about what I'd cook for dinner. Thinking about my family. My son. The boy I carried for 9 months, nursed through fevers, watched take his first steps on the very floor where those apples would soon roll like my shattered heart. Mom, it's time for you to move out. You're making the house feel heavy. Heavy. I made the house feel heavy. The house I scrubbed on my hands and knees when he was too young to help. The house where I changed his diapers at 3 in the morning, where I packed his lunches for 18 years, where I celebrated every birthday, every achievement, every milestone of his life. Heavy. The bag slipped from my fingers like my faith in humanity slipped from my soul. Those apples scattered across the hardwood floors I'd polished 1,000 times, and I watched them roll away like the tears I was too shocked to cry. Each apple hitting the baseboard sounded like another piece of my heart breaking against the walls of the home I'd given everything to create. Do you want to know what heavy feels like? Heavy is carrying a child who will one day look you in the eyes and tell you that your presence, your very existence, is a burden. Heavy is realizing that the unconditional love you poured into another human being has an expiration date, and that date is apparently when you become inconvenient. I stood there in that doorway, frozen like a statue of stupidity, clutching the remaining grocery bag to my chest like it could somehow shield me from the blade he'd just twisted into my heart. The same chest where I'd held him as a baby when he cried. The same arms that had comforted him through nightmares, through heartbreaks, through every disappointment life had thrown his way. But now I was the nightmare. I was the disappointment. I was the heavy burden dragging down the household I had built with my own 2 hands and the sweat of my brow. They didn't just take my roof, they erased my existence. They erased 43 years of marriage to his father, God rest his soul. They erased the woman who'd worked double shifts as a nurse to pay for his college education while his father battled cancer. They erased the mother who'd given them the deed to the house, who'd handed over her life savings, who'd signed over her late husband's pension because family comes first. Family always comes first. What a fool I was. What a blind, trusting, pathetic fool. I retreated to my room at the back of the house, my room, in my own home, like a wounded animal crawling to its den to die. The walls I was staring at? I painted them myself in 1987. Soft yellow, like sunshine, because I believed this house would always be filled with warmth and light and love. I chose that color on a Saturday morning with my husband, may he rest in peace, and my 10-year-old son jumping around us, getting more paint on himself than on the walls. The silence in that room was deafening. Just the tick-tick-tick of the clock on my nightstand, the same clock that had counted down the minutes to every precious moment in this house. And underneath it, seeping through the floorboards like poison, I could hear them. Laughing. My son and his wife, downstairs in my living room, laughing like they hadn't just driven a stake through the heart of the woman who gave them everything. I sat on the edge of my bed, the bed I'd shared with my husband for 38 years before cancer took him from me, and I remembered. Oh, how the memories flooded back like a tsunami of pain. I remembered my 7-year-old son climbing into this very bed during thunderstorms, promising me between lightning strikes that he would never, ever leave me alone. That he would always take care of me, just like Daddy did. I promise, Mama, he'd whispered with his little arms around my neck. I'll never leave you. Never ever. Never ever. The words echoed in my skull like a death knell. I remembered him at 18, the day before he left for college, sitting right here on this bed, holding my hand and swearing that distance would never change how much he loved me. That I would always have a place in his life, in his home, in his heart. I remembered his wedding day, when he stood up during his speech and called me his hero, his inspiration, the strongest woman he'd ever known. The entire reception applauded while I cried tears of joy and pride. I remembered when his father died, how he held me at the funeral and promised that I would never be alone. That his house was my house, forever and always. Forever and always. What a joke. What a cruel, sadistic joke. The betrayal didn't just cut, it carved out pieces of my soul and left me hollow. This was the child I'd carried beneath my heart for 9 months. The baby I'd nursed in the middle of the night until my body ached from exhaustion. The toddler I'd chased around this very house, baby-proofing every corner to keep him safe. The child I'd read bedtime stories to until my voice was hoarse. The teenager I'd waited up for until 2 in the morning, sick with worry until I heard his key in the door. This was the young man I'd put through college by working 16-hour shifts at the hospital, coming home with my feet bleeding in my shoes and my back screaming in agony. Also, he could have the education I never had. The son I'd believed in when his teachers said he'd never amount to anything. The man I'd supported through 3 different career changes and 2 failed business ventures, each time telling him that failure wasn't falling down, it was staying down. This was my child. My baby. My everything. And he'd just told me I was too heavy for the home I'd built for him. They didn't just want me gone, they wanted me erased. Like I'd never existed. Like the 43 years I'd spent in this house meant nothing. Like the love I'd poured into every room, every meal, every moment meant less than nothing. But somewhere in that darkness, somewhere beneath the crushing weight of betrayal and heartbreak, something cold and hard began to crystallize in my chest. It started as a whisper, barely audible over the sound of my breaking heart, but it grew stronger with each passing hour. If they want me gone, they will never see me crawl. The tears stopped. Just like that. One moment I was drowning in grief, and the next I was perfectly, crystallinely clear. They wanted the helpless old woman to disappear? Fine. But they would learn that this old woman had claws they'd never seen. I picked up my phone with steady hands and called Lucia. My oldest friend, my sister in everything but blood, the one person in this world who'd never betrayed me, never let me down, never made me feel like a burden. Lucia, I said, my voice calm as winter morning, I need your help. And I need you to ask no questions until I'm ready to give answers. God bless that woman. 47 years of friendship, and she didn't hesitate for a second. What do you need, mi amor? I need to disappear. But first, I need to make sure I take everything that's mine with me. Lucia knew exactly what I meant. She'd been there through my marriage, through my husband's death, through every family gathering where I'd been treated like the queen I deserved to be. She'd also been there 2 years ago when I'd made the biggest mistake of my life, signing over the deed to my son for tax purposes. She'd warned me then. She'd begged me not to do it. A mother's heart is bigger than her brain, she'd said. But Carmen, baby, don't give away your security for their convenience. I should have listened. But love makes fools of us all, doesn't it? Within an hour, Lucia had connected me with someone who could help. A property consultant who owed her a favor, someone discreet, someone who understood that sometimes a woman needs to reclaim what was always hers to begin with. That night, I began my research. Not the desperate scrambling of a helpless victim, but the methodical, precise investigation of a woman who'd spent 40 years as a nurse, who understood documentation, who knew how to read between the lines of legal documents and medical charts and bureaucratic nonsense. What I found made my blood run cold and my resolve burn white hot. The deed. The deed I'd signed over to my son for tax purposes 2 years ago. I pulled out my copy, ran my finger along the fine print I'd been too trusting to read carefully the first time. There it was, in black and white. I retained lifetime tenancy rights. Lifetime rights. They couldn't legally force me out. Not now, not ever, not while I drew breath. But that wasn't the worst of it. Oh no, that was just the beginning of the horror show I was about to uncover. I found the bank statements I'd kept meticulously for 43 years. Every deposit, every withdrawal, every penny accounted for. I found the receipts for every improvement I'd made to this house. The new roof in 2019, $23,000 of my savings. The kitchen renovation in 2017, $31,000 of my late husband's life insurance. The new heating system in 2020, $18,000 of my pension money. $72,000 of my money poured into a house I no longer technically owned, but where I had every legal right to live until I died. And then I found something that made my hands shake with rage, so pure it nearly blinded me. Hidden in a folder in my son's desk, a desk that used to be his father's, a desk I'd given him along with everything else, I found loan applications. Multiple loan applications, all using my house as collateral. My house. The house I'd improved with my money, where I had lifetime rights, being used as collateral for loans I knew nothing about. The betrayal was complete. They weren't just trying to emotionally manipulate me into leaving, they were actively trying to steal the roof over my head. Revenge isn't fire. It's frost. You move quietly, and you let the cold do the work. I became a ghost in my own home. I woke before dawn, made my coffee in silence, and spent my days planning with the precision of a military operation. I smiled at breakfast. I did the laundry. I tended the garden I'd planted with my own hands 20 years ago. To anyone watching, I was the same broken old woman who'd been told she was too heavy for her own home. But at night, when they slept peacefully in the master bedroom I'd shared with my husband, I worked. I photographed every document. I cataloged every improvement I'd made. I traced every dollar I'd invested. I built an unshakable case for my legal right to remain in my home for the rest of my natural life. And then I built something even better. I built an escape plan that would leave them exactly what they deserved, nothing. The property consultant Lucia had found was a miracle worker. Within a week, she'd identified a legal loophole that even I hadn't known existed. Because I'd made substantial improvements to the property after signing over the deed, and because those improvements were made with my own funds, I could legally force a sale and claim my percentage of the proceeds. 68%. That's what my improvements and lifetime tenancy rights were worth. 68% of the current market value of a house worth $847,000. $576,000. That's what my lawyer calculated I could walk away with if I chose to exercise my rights. $576,000. More than enough to buy my own place, to live comfortably for the rest of my life, to never again depend on the kindness of children who saw me as a burden. But here's the beautiful part, the part that made me smile for the first time since that horrible day. If I forced the sale, my son and his wife would have to pay me my share, or lose the house entirely. They wanted me gone? I'd be gone. But I'd take what was mine, and they'd be left with a mortgage payment they couldn't afford and a debt that would follow them for the rest of their lives. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. I spent 3 weeks preparing in secret, sorting through 43 years of memories, deciding what was worth saving and what could burn with the bridges I was about to torch. Every family photo that included my ungrateful son went into the fireplace. Every gift he'd given me over the years went into donation bags. Every trace of the love I'd wasted on him would be erased from my new life. But I kept the good things. I kept the photos of my husband, may he rest in peace. I kept the letters he'd written me during his deployment in Vietnam. I kept my nursing school diploma and my 40 years of perfect attendance awards. I kept the jewelry my own mother had passed down to me, the jewelry I'd planned to give to a daughter-in-law who clearly saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to her comfort. And then I waited. I waited for them to show their true colors completely. I didn't have to wait long. It was a Thursday morning when the lawyer called. My son had tried to use the house as collateral for a $200,000 loan. Without my knowledge. Without my consent. Despite knowing I had lifetime tenancy rights. The loan had been denied, thank God, because the bank had done their due diligence and discovered the legal complications. But the intent was clear. They weren't just trying to push me out, they were trying to steal from me. That's when the frost in my veins turned to liquid nitrogen. That's when I stopped being a heartbroken mother and became something far more dangerous, a woman with nothing left to lose. I called my lawyer immediately. "File the papers," I said. "I want to exercise my right to force the sale. I want every penny I'm owed, and I want it now." "Mrs. Alvarez," she said gently, "are you absolutely certain? Once we file these papers, there's no going back. Your relationship with your son will be over." I finished for her. My relationship with my son ended the day he told me I was too heavy for the home I built. File the papers. The papers were served on a Friday afternoon. I watched from my bedroom window as the process server handed my son the documents that would change his life forever. I watched his face go white as he read the legal language that spelled out exactly how much money he owed me and exactly how little time he had to pay it. I watched him storm into the house, slamming doors, shouting at his wife, making phone calls with the panicked desperation of a man who'd just realized he'd underestimated his opponent. That night, he came to my room. He knocked like he was approaching the door of a stranger, not the woman who'd given birth to him. "Mom," he said through the door, his voice shaking, "we need to talk." "No," I replied calmly, not even looking up from the book I was reading, "we don't. You need to talk to your lawyer. You need to figure out how you're going to pay me the $576,000 you owe me. You need to decide whether you're going to write me a check or lose the house entirely. But we don't need to talk." "Mom, please." "I'm sorry. I was stressed, I didn't mean." "You meant every word," I said, my voice cutting through his pathetic attempts at manipulation like a scalpel through skin. "You meant it when you called me heavy. You meant it when you tried to use my house as collateral without my knowledge. You meant it when you decided I was expendable. So now you can mean it when you write me a check for what you owe me." Silence. Beautiful, perfect silence. "I don't have that kind of money, Mom." "Then you'd better start packing." 3 days later, the police came. My own son had called the police on me, claiming I was mentally incompetent, claiming I was being manipulated by outside forces, claiming I didn't understand what I was doing. Do you know what I felt when I opened the door to see 2 officers standing on my porch? Relief. Pure, crystalline relief. Because this was the moment when any remaining doubt about my decision would be erased forever. "Ma'am," the younger officer said politely, "we've received a report that you may need assistance with some legal documents that are confusing you." I smiled. Actually smiled. The first genuine smile I'd felt in weeks. "Officers," I said, stepping aside to let them in, "please come in. I think you'll find this very interesting." I led them to my dining room table, where I'd laid out every document, every receipt, every piece of evidence of my legal right to do exactly what I was doing. I walked them through my 43 years in this house, my investments in the property, my lifetime tenancy rights, and my son's attempts to defraud me. The older officer whistled low when I showed him the loan applications. "Ma'am," he said, "you're not the one who needs assistance here. Your son tried to commit fraud, and you're well within your legal rights to protect yourself." They left after taking a full report. My son wasn't charged with anything yet, but they made it clear that any further attempts to interfere with my legal proceedings would result in criminal charges. That evening, I placed the signed sale contract on the kitchen table where he couldn't miss it. Not the legal papers demanding payment, those had been served days ago. This was the contract I'd signed with my buyers, a lovely retired couple who'd fallen in love with the house and were prepared to pay cash. The house would be sold in 30 days. My son had 30 days to pay me what he owed me, or he'd be out on the street with nowhere to go and a debt that would haunt him for the rest of his life. When he found the contract, I was sitting in my father's old recliner in the living room, the chair where I'd rocked my son to sleep as a baby, the chair where I'd held him when he cried over his first broken heart. "You said I was too old for this house," I told him calmly. "Now it's too young for you." His face crumpled. For a moment, just a moment, I saw the little boy who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms. The child who'd promised never to leave me. But that child was gone. The man standing in front of me had killed him. "Mom, please," he whispered. "This is our home." "No," I said, standing up with the dignity of a queen reclaiming her throne. "This was my home. You made it very clear that I was no longer welcome here. So now, neither are you." I left at dawn on a Tuesday, exactly 1 month after he told me I was too heavy for the house I'd built with my love, my sweat, and my sacrifice. I packed my car with the things that mattered, the photos of my husband, my mother's jewelry, the few possessions that held real meaning, and I walked out of that house for the last time. They stood in the doorway watching me go. My son, his wife, their children, my grandchildren, who I'd probably never see again. They looked shocked, broken, like they couldn't believe I'd actually gone through with it. What did they expect? Did they think I'd back down? Did they think I'd crawl back to them, begging for forgiveness for the crime of being inconvenient? As Lucia drove me away from the house I'd called home for 43 years, I watched it fade in the side mirror. Every memory, every sacrifice, every moment of joy and sorrow disappearing behind me like smoke. You can build a house for love, but you cannot live in it once love leaves. My new apartment is small but mine. Completely, legally, irrevocably mine. It sits on the edge of a lake, and every morning I drink my coffee on the balcony, watching the sunrise paint the water gold. I've planted flowers in pots, geraniums and petunias, and the same yellow marigolds I used to grow in the garden I left behind. I started keeping a journal again, something I hadn't done since my husband died. Every day, I write down something I'm grateful for, something that brings me joy, something that reminds me that life didn't end when my son broke my heart. Today I wrote, "I am grateful for the lesson my son taught me. He taught me that love without respect is worthless. He taught me that sacrifice without appreciation is meaningless. He taught me that I am stronger than I ever knew. They thought they took my home. They didn't know they set me free. Free from the crushing weight of unappreciated sacrifice. Free from the exhausting burden of loving people who saw me as expendable. Free from the prison of expecting nothing in return for everything I gave. I sleep peacefully now. I wake up when I want to wake up. I eat what I want to eat. I watch the shows I want to watch without someone sighing dramatically about how I'm taking up space on their couch. I exist without apology, without explanation, without the constant fear that I'm being too much, asking for too much, expecting too much. I am finally, beautifully, completely free. Sometimes I wonder if my son thinks about me. If he lies awake at night in whatever cramped apartment he managed to find after I forced the sale of our house, wondering how it all went so wrong. If he tells himself I'm the villain in this story, the bitter old woman who destroyed his life out of spite. Let him think that. Let him live with the consequences of his choices, just like I've had to live with mine. Because here's what I know now, what I wish I'd understood 43 years ago when I first held him in my arms. Love is not enough. Love without respect is just elaborate self-destruction. Sacrifice without appreciation is just a slow suicide of the soul. When love turns into entitlement, silence becomes the loudest form of revenge. I didn't destroy my son's life. I simply stopped allowing him to destroy mine. The other day, I was at the grocery store, the same chain where I'd shopped for my family for decades, when I ran into Mrs. Rodriguez from my old neighborhood. She looked at me with such pity, such concern. "Carmen," she said, reaching for my hand, "I heard what happened." "I'm so sorry, Mija. How could he do that to you? After everything you gave him?" I smiled at her, the same genuine smile I wake up with every morning now. "Mrs. Rodriguez," I said gently, "don't feel sorry for me. Feel sorry for him. He lost the best thing he ever had, and he'll spend the rest of his life knowing it was his own fault." And it's true. I was the best thing he ever had. I was the mother who would have died for him, who would have given him everything, who would have loved him unconditionally until my last breath. I was his soft place to land, his safety net, his biggest champion and fiercest protector. He threw all of that away because he thought I was too heavy for his house. Now he knows what heavy really feels like. Heavy is the weight of regret. Heavy is the burden of knowing you destroyed something irreplaceable. Heavy is lying awake at night, realizing that the person who loved you most in this world is gone forever, and it's entirely your fault. I hope that weight crushes him. I hope it follows him for the rest of his days. I hope that every time he sees an elderly woman in a grocery store, every time he passes a house with yellow marigolds in the garden, every time he smells the perfume I used to wear, he remembers what he lost. And I hope he remembers why he lost it. As for me, I'm writing my story. Day by day, page by page, building a new life from the ashes of the old one. Yesterday I wrote day 127, not of loss, but of freedom. Tomorrow I'll write day 128. Each day is a gift I give myself, a reminder that I am valuable, I am worthy, I am enough. Each morning is a chance to build something beautiful from the wreckage of broken promises and wasted love. Respect your parents while their hearts are still open. Because one day, they might quietly close the door for good. And when that door closes, it never opens again. Not for apologies, not for regrets, not for the desperate pleas of children who suddenly realize what they've lost. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. Some words, once spoken, can never be taken back. Some hearts, once broken, choose to stay that way rather than risk being shattered again. My heart chose freedom over forgiveness. My soul chose peace over reconciliation. My life chose dignity over desperate hope for change that will never come. I am 68 years old, and I am finally living for myself. Finally choosing myself. Finally understanding that the greatest love I can give is the love I give to the woman who survived everything and emerged stronger. The woman who built a home with her heart and watched it crumble, then built a new one with her courage. The woman who loved completely and was betrayed completely, then chose to love herself completely. The woman who was told she was too heavy for the house she built, then proved she was strong enough to walk away and never look back. That woman is me. And I am magnificent.